Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Inspiring Life with Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth Browning, and tonight you are going to have a firsthand experience of how to become the hero in your own story. So let me get right to introducing our most special guest tonight. Ilona Chessid is a Harvard Ph.D. who started her career as a professor of literature and went on to work as an editor and trainer for Fortune 500 companies and international publishing houses. She's currently an editor and writing coach and has just completed her own historical novel set in the French Revolution. Ilona's online course, Become the Hero of Your Own Story, will be entering its beta phase along with her new blog this spring. And whether it's a matter of crafting a novel or struggling to create a new story for your own life, she loves to help people discover the transformative power of a story well told. So let's give a very warm welcome to Ilona Chessid. Welcome, Ilona.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Ilona, I'm very excited to have you as a guest because as a filmmaker and as an actress and acting coach, I know the power of a really great story. And I'm fascinated by the technique that you've discovered to help anyone begin to create a really great story for their own life. So before we get into the exercises, and there will be some exercises, so if you haven't already, grab a pen and a piece of paper because you don't want to miss this, and we're going to be writing our own stories tonight. But before we get to the exercises, could you tell us just a little bit about what brought you to this place and about the work you're doing now?
Sure. So I think I knew I wanted to be a novelist from the time I was about 6 years old. I just really dreamed about it. I wanted to do it. I felt that desire, that longing really deeply. And so I did what many of us do when we really, really want something. I ran away from it. And I went, but I didn't actually go completely away from it. I ended up studying literature and becoming a literature professor, studying language, because I knew I wanted to be as close as I could be to powerful stories and beautiful language, but I just wasn't ready. I was too scared to just put myself in the chair and actually write a novel on my own. And so I taught, then I left academia after some years, worked in the business world, but that longing just wouldn't go away. That desire just wouldn't let me go.
I'm glad it didn't.
Me too. So eventually I came back, or I sat in the chair finally, and I wrote a novel. And I got an agent, and the novel went out to all the top publishing houses, and I got some wonderful feedback, fantastic encouragement. From what I understand, we got very close, but the book didn't sell. So that was a big disappointment. But at the same time, looking back, I realized that it was the best thing that could have happened. Or in story terms, I would say I didn't get what I wanted, but I got what I needed.
Wow.
Because it set me on this journey. It actually started a story, right? It set me on this journey to really try to understand the feedback that I received and to figure out what you need to do to really tell a compelling story and to create unforgettable characters and all the things that we set out to do when we want to write a novel. And so I began on that journey, but at the same time, I knew I needed to take another journey. I needed to try to understand myself better and figure out how to really step into that role of writer and of feeling like a writer. So I started to do a lot of work, a lot of self-development work. I realized that I needed to think not just about what was landing on the page, but what was going on in my mind. I needed to, let's say, sharpen my mindset as well as my metaphors. So I went on these parallel journeys. And what was amazing about it was that the more I looked into one of those areas, the more I saw the resonances with the other. Whatever I started to think about in the world of story, if I started to think about backstories, subtext, theme, setting, pace, voice, all of those things had their counterparts in my life, I realized. And
That's
so I
so
started,
interesting. That's so interesting because we always focus on where it is we think we want to go, and we don't realize that this is the journey that actually will take us there.
exactly.
So, and
So
that's what your course is that you're developing now.
Exactly. I ended up developing this method, or I would say a framework for thinking about story, but at the same time, I found a way of approaching life. I realized that each one was informing the other and helping me understand, moving me forward in each of those ways.
So I know we're excited to try some of the exercises. I guess the first question I have is, how do we start from where we're at? Because some of us have been around for a while, and I look and say, I have so many stories. I have my teaching story and my daughter's story and my romantic story. And it's like, where do we start? And I think an even bigger question for those of us who are over the age of 50, what's actually possible for the stories that we dream of creating at this point? Like, is the real story we want to write still possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for those of us who've been traveling a while on this journey, it's easy to think, my gosh, why didn't I start doing this when I was 20 or 30 or 40? It's late. I'm behind the 8 ball. I'm never going to catch up. And so what I would say to that is, if we take on this practice, right, of looking at life through the lens of story, of developing our story sense as a way of understanding the world, we can look at some very prevalent advice around story writing, around novel writing. Let's take the novel as an example, which is that much of the time we find that we really take longer to get the story started than we realized, right? We can have pages and pages. And what we're doing is we're coming to understand our character. We're getting a sense of what she wants. We're figuring out the world. We're learning about the character, and we're learning about the story world. And so the advice that I've often seen given is, open up your manuscript to page 50 and take a look at the first 49 pages and ask yourself, do I really need all of that? And then many times you find that actually your story begins on page 50.
I love that. I love that.
No, that
I will
doesn't
take
mean,
it.
yes, and that doesn't mean though that you want to take your first 49 years and throw them away and say that was not valuable. On the contrary, what it means is that those first years, whether it's 35, 64, 49, whatever it is, those first years are actually essential to getting you to a place where you can embark on the story that you're about to live. So they are all the setup. They are all getting you to the place where your new adventure can begin.
I love that. I have a friend who said the other day that she sees the first 50 years as the onions in the pan, that you put in the seasoning, you saute the onions, and then you're really ready to cook. So I really love this idea. So let's talk about creating a story from our lives. And the first thing that comes up for me, I know when I'm really moved and affected by a great reading a story or watching a movie, I find myself so mesmerized and excited, and also connected to the main character when they face challenges or when they have setbacks or when they make mistakes, and how are they going to get through it. But then when I look at my story and I look at the setbacks and the regrets and the mistakes, it feels like the opposite happens. It feels like my story kind of grinds to a standstill. I'm like, ugh, why? Yeah. So can you address that?
I can. Actually, we could do a couple of exercises. We could do a first exercise that gets to this idea of, I'm starting late, and think about that first 50 pages kind of thing. And then I absolutely think it's important to address what you just said, which is the
Perfect.
idea.
Are we ready?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So get your pens and papers. Get ready to be dazzled by your life.
I think an important thing to point out right at the beginning is that in this world in which we think about ourselves as characters and we think about our lives as a story, in all these exercises, instead of writing them as I, thinking them in terms of me, think of yourself as a character. You can give that character another name if you like. Sometimes that distance really helps us. But sometimes saying our own name, as I know you work with in some of your exercises, it's so powerful. So either give this character a different name or your own name, but we're going to think about it in the third person. We're going to think about it as a he or a she or whatever pronoun you like when we do the exercise.
Wonderful.
So at this point, take a few moments and think about all the years that have led up to where we are today, where you are in your life today. And think about this character. I'm going to use she, by the way. I hope that's okay, just since that's how I think of these things, but whatever pronoun you like. So who is she today? And what I mean by that is, well, let's say whatever comes to mind, but some examples might be, what does she do? What roles does she play? How does she feel and think? What has she learned about herself? So what do you know about this character from the pages that have led to today? Okay, so just take a few more seconds on that. Okay, and now you want to ask yourself, what is most relevant in those past experiences for moving forward? In other words, for the journey that she's about to take, this journey that you're thinking of now. And remember, our lives are made up of many different journeys. So this can be, when we think about this, we're not covering your entire life, but think about, if you think about the wheel of life, right? With your work life, your family life, your romantic life, spiritual life, we can choose a journey in any one of those areas to think about because we embark on many of these in the life. So for the journey, whatever journey you're thinking that you as this character is about to embark on, ask yourself what's most relevant in the past experiences that she's had for this journey. What lessons has she learned? What skills has she acquired? Resources, beliefs, allies, mentors, whatever it is that you think of that could be valuable going forward. How has all of this set her up for where she's going now? Okay, just a little bit more on that. Okay, and the last thing we'll do in this exercise is ask yourself, what could she let go of as she embarks on this journey? What might hold her back if she doesn't leave it behind?
That's the first 50 pages.
Well, yes, we take forward what works, right? What's useful, what will help us, but we want to leave behind what might not.
As part of her story, actually.
Exactly. Okay. So how did you do, Elizabeth? What do you think?
It's really fascinating to me, especially if I say she instead of I, because, I've done so much work on myself, but I haven't stepped back and looked at it as this glorious story. And it was really interesting to be able to talk about her, both in the wonderful things she's done, and also the tremendous effort she's made, and the challenges that have come up. And it was really interesting to say, what could she let go of to move forward in her story? Not from like, what should I let go of, but what could this character begin to leave behind in order to move forward? So that was really interesting to me. It's like her belief that she somehow is responsible for the world and everything that happens in it, and her tie to what everyone else says and thinks, as opposed to following her truth. Yep. And to let go of her criticism and herself and her perfectionism, what might happen. I start going, oh, I'm excited for her.
I think that's one of the gifts of story, right? That power of the vicariousness, that we can get that distance. When we get caught up in a story, we're living, we're experiencing, we're growing very often with a character, but it's safer. So we can take advantage of that distance by thinking of our lives, by looking through this lens.
And then, of course, there are those things where you start to go, wah, wah, wah. Oh my gosh, why? What was that? What was I thinking? And I think the struggles it does feel different when you're watching a movie than when you're dealing with your own struggles.
Yeah, certainly. But I really find that, again, one of the great gifts that I felt came to me through story and continues to come to me is the absolute certainty that when it comes to a story, the struggle is the story. You don't want to eliminate the struggle. That's where the growth is. That's where the transformation comes. And we watch stories, we consume stories, we love them because we get to participate in a character who starts at A and ends at Z, right? Who moves, who goes through the arc of something and transforms. And so without that struggle, there is no story. If the character got what she wanted on page 2, or in the first 2 minutes of the film, you'd close the book, you'd leave the theater.
I love that. I love that.
That's where it all happens, right? In the struggle. And actually, it's important to remember that a story, it's not a series of events. It's not a plot. It's not this and then this and then this happens and then that happens. It's the way a particular character experiences what's happening. It's the way that character lives what's happening and suffers and learns and grows. So when we feel stuck or when we feel discontented, I find it really comforting to think that discontentment, that longing, that's what opens the door onto story. And without that, we have nowhere to go. We can't,
Wouldn't that be beautiful to live with that knowledge, to say this is the story and the challenges are part of what makes it rich and wonderful? And so if we were going to write that, it's a different way of looking at things that are not going well.
Absolutely. And as storytellers and as writers, we understand that what we have to do is actually get our character into as much trouble as possible, create as many problems as we can, so that they have to learn and grow in their efforts to get out of it. And it just is comforting to keep saying to oneself, if I weren't struggling, if it wasn't difficult, if I weren't reaching for something, first of all, there'd be no stakes, right? I wouldn't be going for something that mattered. And also, I wouldn't be moving. I wouldn't be living and growing.
And let me clarify, in case my children are watching this, when she says get into as much trouble as you can, she's not talking about creating any serious infractions of the law. No. But I think what I'm looking at is, it's really true. I've heard that everybody needs drama, and it really depends on the drama that you want to work with and create. Do you want to create the reality television show kind of drama where everyone's crying and screaming? Or do you want to create a drama where you want to you want to climb a mountain that's bigger than what you think you're going to be able to climb, or do something that you're scared that you wouldn't be able to do? And that feels like good problems. It's like,
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be saving the world from aliens. You know, when we say a lot of really struggle, it can just be a very internal, improving a relationship with a sibling or a parent or a colleague. It can be something that feels a bit smaller, but it is just digging in and embracing that idea, embracing the discomfort. That's what we learned when I talked about these parallels, right? In the world of personal development, we talk about getting out of our comfort zone because we know that's where the growth is. And
your novel is a great example, because you as a character came to a turning point where you got this great feedback, and then the thing we're most afraid of happened and people didn't buy, and then you had to make a decision. Right. Do I continue to write? Do I go back and make it better, or do I throw in the towel? And that's one of those beautiful moments in a story, and you have just finished the next draft. Is that right?
That's right. So now, and I believe it's a much, much better story for having gone through what I went through. So that disappointment really opened the door onto a new story. And I think that was very important. And I know you were talking about, you know, when you feel like you're in over your head. I know that many times I said to myself, am I crazy writing a novel set in the French Revolution? It seemed like way too big. And I just kept telling myself, you know, if I'm not biting off more than I can chew, I'm not growing, I'm not pushing myself. So we can do an exercise, if you like, about struggle.
Yes, I'd love it.
Okay. So remember that you are still that character that you're writing about. So we're thinking in the third person here. Write a statement about something she's reaching for and struggling with. You can write it in the form of she wants X, but. So something she wants, she's longing for, but something's in the way. So we're going to just start by just noting down what that might be. And now you want to ask yourself, how is she framing that struggle? Remember, we talked about how it's the way the character lives through what's happening, how they experience it. So what story is she telling herself about those obstacles? And then you want to think about the before and the after of the story. So what's the starting point for this character and where is she going to end up?
And what if we don't know where she's going to end up?
Well, very often you don't have a sense until, or it changes as you go. But when you're crafting a story, again, to think about what we learn in the world of personal development, they say start with the end in mind, right? So if you have something you want to aim at, and you want to think about where is the start and where's the end. So you know what you can do? You can draw a dot at the left end of your paper, and then draw another dot towards the right side of the paper, and draw an arc like a bridge connecting one dot to the other. That's the journey. That's the arc of the story. And then ask yourself about your character, what will have to change in her outer world and also within her in order for her to get to the other side.
Ooh.
Okay, so that one gives us a sense. It's the idea is to just get a sense that it's always a journey. It's always in motion. You may not know where you're going to end up. Often you don't. And when you're writing, especially, some people love to not know where they're going, but you want to have a sense of what you're aiming for. And remember that it's going to be twists and turns along the way.
I love this too, in terms of it creating a story for someone else that's very much like me. But like I said, she's going to have to start to learn the things that she thinks she wants to do and experiment and play. Mm-hmm. And she's going to have to give up what the outcome is going to be, but she needs to like immerse herself. And I started to envision what that might look like for her. Mm-hmm. If she moved past all of the reasons why she thought she couldn't. And this is a really brilliant way to look at this, really brilliant way. So one last thing, because I know we're almost out of time. We're going to go a few minutes over because this is so juicy. So we're excited. We have a vision. We've got a character that we love. We've got someplace we're going. We've reconciled the first 50 pages or however many there are. Mm-hmm. And then we turn and there we're ready to soar. And then there it is. It's the person or the thing, or the dragon, or the thing that goes, oh, that's still there, or that just appeared that says no. And I would love for you to talk just a moment about that.
Sure. So I think what you're getting at there is, well, certainly obstacles, but I think if you're looking at one big obstacle, we can think of that as an antagonist. I mean, every story has to have some kind of antagonist, because stories are about conflict, right? Stories about invoking emotion, and emotion rises up out of conflict. So everybody loves a great villain, right, in a story, in a movie, but we really don't want them in our lives. On the other hand, there are people, certainly at times, who seem to be really in our way. And they don't even have to be people who are actively choosing to thwart us, right? They can be people to whom we've assigned that role. Mm. They may not even know that they're an antagonist in our story, right? We might be putting them in that role, using them to kick off our compare and despair activities. And of course, sometimes the antagonist in a story really is coming from within, right? There's always an inner journey. There's always, we have to let go of the limiting beliefs. The character always has to shed, change, move. But sometimes that's the primary antagonist, that we tend to get in our own way. And we really have to think about that. So one of the ways that I like to think about it, which I find really helpful in my life, is to remember that every great story, right, needs an antagonist. Why? Because the antagonist moves the main character's story forward, right? They're there for a reason. So if you think about your life as something that you're creating, that you're crafting, then what I find really helpful is to constantly stop and ask myself, okay, why did I write this in? Right? What is this doing in my story? What is this here to teach me? What can I learn from it? And an antagonist is a wonderful example of that, because very often in stories, the hero and the antagonist are really a perfect pair. You know, they're more alike than you would think. Sometimes it's because they have similar goals, but they go about it in very different ways. Sometimes they're connected, let's say, by the place they live, or maybe by a parent, or, you know, specifics in their lives. But the antagonist is somehow always like perfectly chosen for that particular main character. And so we can think about that, because what the antagonist does is shine a light on the vulnerable places, right, in the hero, on what maybe needs to heal, on where that hero needs to think about things differently. And that's also the point, the vulnerable point, that the antagonist often will try to exploit. And the hero is going to maybe get tempted to go in the wrong direction, but eventually, in most stories, they have to find their way. They have to find their inner strength. So
it's a wonderful way of thinking, that the things that we think are there to stop us are actually necessary to help us move forward.
They're moving our story forward. That's a way to think about it. And it can be very helpful, you know, when we frame things that way and look for the learning. So if we have time, we could do a quick exercise on that.
A quickie. Okay. I want to know how to move past my villains.
All right, we'll do something fast here. So think of someone in your life who's driving you crazy. And this isn't just a minor annoyance, right? This is the kind of person that really gets to you for some reason. And in a couple of sentences, just write down how they are getting in your way.
And it could be a part of yourself.
Yes, absolutely. You can address that part of yourself that in this particular journey you're casting as an antagonist. And you might also think about how the hero and the antagonist in this story. So I'm straying away from the third person there. Let's stay in the third person. Think about how that character, how that antagonist is getting in your character's way, and think about how the two of them might be more similar than you would expect. What might connect them? And you can also take a moment to think about that antagonist point of view, because as writers, we always have to think about the point of view of the other characters, right? A villain is always the hero of his own story. So give that a moment to think about. And then let's just ask, what could your hero learn from this conflict? How might it move her story forward? What is this antagonist shining a light on? What broken place, right? What thing that needs to heal? Because often our greatest strength is in our broken places. So something I like to keep in mind too is when we think about story, we know that when that hero finally sheds those limiting beliefs and lets go of what she needs to let go of and really becomes aligned, right? When her outer goal and that inner self become aligned, that's when she's unstoppable. And often that happens at the low point in a story. And that's when you fly up to the climax. That's when things really move. And so we can think about in those terms, and that can be very helpful. So take just a second to dream and ask yourself, if your character were to heal and find that inner strength, where do you imagine she could go? What do you imagine she could do? So you could use the sentence, as the hero of the story, she would. Okay, so I think we'll wrap that one up, and that's the last exercise we'll do.
So I know, Ilona, this is so exciting to me. Well, you have a course that's an extended course that is going to take us much deeper, and I know we're just dipping our toe in tonight, but just having a glimpse of what it looks like to honor our story and to actually ask these questions, not from a self-incriminating, judgmental, woulda, coulda, shoulda place, but to start to create a story and to know that, hey, we may just be beginning. We may have just figured out what our story is really going to be about. I am so excited by that. And I love that you took the time to lead us in this. If anybody wants to get more information or wants to get in touch with Ilona, you can reach her at her email address. It's Ilona Chessid at ichessid@gmail.com. And her program is going to be coming out in the spring. And you have any final words as we put on our armor and jump on our horses and get ready to gallop into our lives?
Sure. I mean, I just think it's so valuable to be able to develop our story sense, because there's so many ways we can apply it. And when you do that, I mean, then like binging Netflix, right, is not wasting time. It's a self-development exercise. But I think one of the
You just made my husband very happy about that.
But I think, you know, we talk a lot about the power of visualization, and, you know, the how helpful it is, how powerful it is when you can really see something, smell something, taste something, feel it, really inhabit it, and how much more likely you are to get it if you feel that way. And story can train us to do that. So I think there are just so many advantages. I mean, in the course, we talk about everything from how to apply it to dating, to job hunting, to family barbecues. But that, I think, is really one of the core ideas, is that we learn how to visualize and take advantage of that power of that vicariousness. So, I mean, imagine how it would feel if you could yourself craft the story that you most want to live. And I think you just want to remember that your story is beautiful, with all its imperfections, with all its challenges and twists and turns. In fact, it's beautiful because of those imperfections, because of those challenges and twists and turns. It's your own personal journey of transformation. And I think most important, it's the story that only you can tell.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And thank you, everybody who tuned in. And I look forward to hearing the amazing stories that will be emerging from this as we move forward. And everyone just have a beautiful, blessed night. Thank you so much, Ilona.